NextGen pastor at the Covenant Church, which is, if you're familiar, it's where the movie theaters are in Bemidji. It's right across the highway. And I've been there for about 12 years, almost 12 years now. And I started, my first 8 years was the youth pastor, but a year into that time, I took on the role of youth and young adults. And then about 3-4 years ago, I transitioned to this role of NextGen pastor, which is overseeing and supporting all the ministries, kids ministry, youth ministry, and young adults, ages 0 to 30-ish. And so I like to think of it in terms of months to millennials. And it's been fun. We have a variety of things. I'll tell you more about what we're doing with young adults here in a little bit. But let's let Albin introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Albin Sterneman. We're going to stay between the monitors for the video. I'm Albin Sterneman. I'm the youth and young adults pastor here at Bemidji Rekindle Free Church. I've been here since January 1st of 2017, so pretty much fresh out of college-ish. So I'm excited though. This job has a lot of opportunities. I have pretty much birthed through 30-ish. We like to say, yeah, I've been very, very excited about, youth ministry is my main focus, and then we have a young adults ministry as well, which we're getting started. So, yeah.
So before we tell you more about our young adult ministries, I just like to get a sense of the room. Like, who's here? What is your role? What's your engagement? So that as we're talking, we know where you're at as well. So can we start over here? And we'll just go by row, kind of zigzagging like this, and then come over to this side afterwards. Okay, can we start with you?
Sure.
So tell us your name, what town, what church, what's your engagement with young adults, what capacity, what role?
Sure. I'm Katie. I'm from Beaver Falls, from the Invitation Church. I'm a youth leader.
Okay. Okay.
Did you consider 0 to 30?
What?
Young adults, what age is that?
Oh, we consider it 18 to 30-ish, right there.
Okay, I just have a lot of contact.
Okay. A lot of contact with adults. Okay.
Kathy Anderson from Bagley Evangelical Free Church.
Okay.
And I currently am a children's Sunday school teacher, but I'm thinking I'll be doing some youth coming up.
Okay.
But also we have young families in the church, and there's a gap. We have a lot of older people and then the young families, trying to get the young families more involved and just doing something.
And the young families, they're young adults themselves.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Got it. Great.
Including my kids.
Okay.
My name is Audrey Emmel. I'm from Leonard, which is near Clearbrook.
Sorry, as you're coming in, you can grab the handouts right here at the table.
I work with the Youth Connection, the Clearwater Life Center.
Okay, great.
Paris Norwood. I live in Bemidji, but I'm active with the Direct Life Center, our school Youth Connection.
Okay.
Just involved in our church and do mentoring. I can help. That'd be fun.
Good. Okay.
Involved in the youth.
Okay. Great.
My name's Malone. I live in a suburb of Ministries called Chaska.
Yeah.
And I went on working as a para-professional in Shakopee with middle school kids. And in my previous life, I used to be a youth pastor and would work for Timber Bay.
All right.
What church do you go to in Chaska?
It's not in Chaska. I go to Grace, which is in Eden Prairie.
Oh, okay,
So Grace Eden Prairie. Okay.
My buddy is the Free Church youth pastor.
Oh.
There, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Lauren Hayes. I attend church here, and we have 3 young adult children who bring a lot of young adults to our house. And I help with our youth group here, and right now we're hosting a young adult small group at our house.
Okay.
Samantha Jorn. I attend this church, go to both of your young adult services, and there's young adult small group. So
All right. You're immersed.
I'm Bill. You can take what Lori said and that double that for me. And I used to do it. So I'm Bill.
Right?
Sam Wolkoff, and currently going to Oak Hills for youth ministry. Still trying to figure out exactly where I'm going, but more leaning towards the troubled youth areas.
Okay. But as a young adult yourself.
Yes.
Great.
I'm Debbie Kavanaugh, and I'm a student at Oak Hills, and I'm marrying this guy, so. But
Awesome.
I'm Betty Wilcock, his younger sister, and I work with some youth staff and just that.
Okay. Okay, good.
I'm Peyton, I'm Debbie's best friend. I study at Oak Hills, and I help here with children's ministry.
All right, great.
I'm Brendan Miller. I go to Oak Hills for the youth ministry, and I also attend both Lethbridge and Compass.
Okay, great.
I'm Luke Cosman. I'm from Grand Rapids. I go to New Song Alliance. And I was formerly doing crew and currently doing one of our young adult ministries.
Oh, great. Crew where?
Fantastic Community College.
Okay. Awesome. Let's go over to this side and start with Josiah.
Josiah Jensen. I'm the Beaver Falls Covenant Church youth pastor.
Andrew Kangas, youth leader here.
Good. We'll go with you.
Matthew Carpenter, Beaver Falls Epiphany Station, and I have a teenage daughter, and I was a former troubled youth, and I want to make sure that her path is a little straighter than mine.
Okay. Good.
I'm Jenny. I recently got married and moved to Wadena, and so I've been working with youth for a long time, and been with YWAM missionary for a few years. So my heart is discipleship, and just want to keep growing in it. Currently figuring out community in the church there.
Great.
Brian England, go to Calvary Free in Walker on the elder board, and we just had an explosion of young families coming in. So
Oh, great.
I want
Okay.
to see what you guys have to say about that.
Sure.
My name is Olivia Watson from Minneapolis United Christian Fellowship Church. I work with kids, and I want to have an idea of young adult. I want to get involved in the church too. That's what I'm doing.
I'm Sylvia, a young adult at the United Christian Fellowship Church in North Minneapolis, and I'm also a leader, young adult leader. So
Okay.
I'm here.
Good. All right, excellent. So we're going to get to some general principles that we've kind of talked out and decided to land on here for doing young adult ministry. But first, we're going to give you a little snapshot of what we do, what our young adult ministries look like, so that you get a better sense of where we're coming from. So we're going to start with Albin here.
Yeah, so when I came to Bemidji, this church saw the change in young adults. They've always had a youth pastor, they've always had adult ministry, but that young adult piece was always kind of missing. They had some lunches, and they had some Bible studies, and they had some smaller things, but they didn't have a clear-cut young adult ministry. So they actually changed the job title before I came up from youth and Christian education to youth and young adults. And so when I came and applied, I was like, I love youth, and I love the idea of college ministry. This is a college town. BSU, Oak Hills, and Northwest Tech are all inside of Bemidji, and so I was very, very excited about the opportunity to do both youth ministry, which is my huge heart, and then young adult ministry as well, which is very much growing on me. And so when I came in, I kind of spent the first year learning Bemidji culture. I'm from the Twin Cities. I went to Northwestern down in Roseville, so the Twin Cities, that's my culture. So coming to Bemidji, I needed to spend some time and learn Bemidji culture because it is very different. And so that's what I did. I spent the first kind of 6 months just learning Bemidji culture, learning our church culture, learning our young adults. And then over the summer, I just kind of brainstormed and prayed about where God was kind of leading us. I kind of felt the call to make a young adult worship service and start from there and see where that goes. And so we launched, after I reeled in an amazing worship director for that, we launched this thing called Vespers, which stands for evening in Latin. But what it does is it gives us an opportunity to have a young adult worship service every first and third Sunday of the month. So we're not meeting consistently and say every week, but we're meeting on the first and third Sunday of the month at about 6 o'clock, and that gives us some flexibility to both grow, but also give some flexibility to young adults, because they like flexibility and they like showing up randomly. So that's what we did, and so we have our Vespers team. We have a nice worship team. We've got some services, but we're really taking this first year to kind of grow where we're going. We're still figuring out what our mission is going to be. We're still figuring out what our goals and objectives are going to be. My heart is very much leaning towards BSU in the next several years, and so that's kind of where I see myself diving in towards. But our church definitely has a lot of young adults in it. We've got all the main young adults. We've got college kids, we've got young professionals, we've got married with kids, and then we've got the ones that cross the paths and get into all three of them. And so we're very excited about where we're going with Vespers on Sunday nights, and yeah.
Good. So our story with the Covenant Church, by the way, I wanted to start by just acknowledging, thank you for being here. Thanks for caring about young adults. Young adults are the most absent demographic in the church across the country. And we need to change that. And if we don't put energy into young adult ministry, then we're going to lose an entire generation of people. And many people like to challenge youth pastors, say that youth ministry is not doing a good enough job so that they stick after they've graduated. And I say, no, that is not correct. Youth ministry is doing great. The church is not engaging young adults when they become young adults. And that's where the problem lies. It's not that youth pastors are doing a bad job. It's that the church is missing engaging young adults where they are. So thanks for being here. I'm really glad to have you here to talk about this with us. So our story is that for the first 7 or 8 years that I was the youth and young adults pastor, we took an approach that I call the integrative approach. And then later I'll tell you more about our church within a church approach. And there are other approaches to doing young adult ministry. So when we get to our principles, the idea is to have them be scalable and transferable no matter what your approach or strategy is. Our integrative approach was get them to church, get them to Sunday services, and integrate them into the life of the church as the best we can, and connect with them through the normal Sunday services, through our normal ministries. So we would send out a van to the different college campuses and transport them to the Sunday service. We would have a free lunch for them after church, and it started out just monthly, but then it turned into weekly. And then we would rotate different cooks and chefs from the church, and they'd come and prepare this great meal. Everybody loved it. We then also would try to connect them with families in the church through a program that we had called Adopt a Student. And we would help pair up families and college students together so they have a home away from home. And they would get help with their car maintenance. They'd have a home-cooked family meal. They could go fishing with the family at some point, or they would get help with their laundry, or just a home to go to get away from the dorms. And it was great. We would also, the last few years of that approach, we added small groups to the time after the free lunch so that we could get them connected to each other a little bit more. We also tried to do some mixers just before the lunchtime so that they could get to know other young adults. And then we had a Bible study that was separate on a Monday night at someone's house. And that was a couple of volunteers in our church who were really passionate about young adults. And they were the Bible study leaders, and they were also there at lunch, and they made all these relational connections. Now we would have anywhere from 20 to 40 young adults, basically college kids, that would participate in, they would come to the service, they would come to the lunch, and then some of them would be involved with small groups, some of them didn't. And then our Bible study on Monday nights had maybe half a dozen, maybe 10 at the most, that would participate in that. So over the years, as we looked at this, there were some problems that I was seeing. One was the Adopt a Student program there were always way more college kids that were wanting to connect with the family than there were families that were willing to connect with college kids. And so we were advertising false hope for them. It was really disheartening. We also found that the preaching was really primarily geared toward adults ages 40 and over. And it really wasn't geared toward life as a young adult. And so they would come to church because they wanted to be at church. They wanted to grow in their faith, but it just really wasn't quite connecting with them. Sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't. And most recently, more often it would be less than what we wanted. We also found the biggest thing was that while we had maybe 20 to 40 young adults, I did some research around the area and found that we have over 5,000 young adults ages 18 to 24 in the Bemidji area. And there's another 2,500 young adults ages 25 to 30. So there's over 7,500 young adults within the Bemidji area. And here we've got 40. You see the problem? And I checked around, I called other churches and other ministries and found that there were maybe 300 to 400 young adults that were meaningfully connected to a church or a campus ministry or a faith community or a Bible study of some sort. There were maybe 300 to 400 that were connected out of 7,500. We're looking at 4 to 5%. And the other 95, 96% are not connected at all. And many of them don't even know Jesus. So my heart was just breaking, realizing that we are missing out on something huge here. And one of the things that I came to realize is it's because, honestly, I'm going to say it bluntly, it's because there's no return on our investment with young adults. There's no money in it. Do you see what I'm saying? So when we do ministry with kids, we've got parents come and then they come to church and they put money in the offering. Okay? So then we can support a staff to go toward kids ministry. We can build that program budget for it. Youth ministry. Oh, we've got to do something for our youth. Let's make sure that we put money into the budget for them and staff it and really care for our youth, even though the ratio is typically one staff person for every 50 teenagers. When it comes to the older adults, we care about our adults, we're preaching toward them, we're caring for them, we're doing all of our visitation with the older adults, we're staffing it, we're budgeting for it. But what about the young adults? Are we budgeting for young adults? Are we pouring staff energy into young adults? Well, they're not giving back because they're poor. They're not making any money. They can't put money in the offering plate. And if they are, they haven't really developed the habit of tithing yet. And so that's just one perspective that I had, realizing what's going on? Why are we not connecting with young adults? Why is the church not putting more energy into it? Well, that's just one reason. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons, but that's the thing that really said, okay, we have to be willing to do this with no expectation of financial return. It's a pouring into ministry and forming them and discipling them to become contributors as well. So now, over the last 2.5 years, we've developed what we call a compass. We decided that we need to do something different that has greater potential that can really reach young adults in a bigger way. Now, we're still building it. We think of it in terms of a church within a church. So it's a worship service on Wednesday nights. It's late after all the other Wednesday night programming. And we have the band that plays on Sunday mornings act as missionaries, and they come and play for the Wednesday night compass service as well. Many of them happen to be young adults anyway. Then I do the primary preaching, and we have sacraments, we have baptisms, we have communion, and then we have kind of some other interactive, engaging worship experiences during that service. And it only is about 50 to 60 minutes total. And then immediately afterwards, we go to small groups. And the small groups are about 20, 25 minutes. Sometimes they might go longer, depending on the group. And then after that, we have dessert, social. And so they come out to the small groups about 10 o'clock, and then they'll just hang out and talk and sometimes play. So they just like to laugh and get to know each other. And then I'm usually getting home about 11:30 on the night as well. We also have then activities. We have different teams, and there's different activities that they'll do, maybe about once a month, and they'll plan. Some of the activities are just pure fun. Let's just go have fun together. And other activities are, let's go serve, let's go help, let's go do something to contribute to somebody else. And so there's a nice little balance there. And we just had our first winter retreat for young adults just a few weekends ago, and it was fantastic. We loved it. It's like 35, almost 40 of us that were a part of that, and we just loved it. It was a great bonding experience. So that's what we're doing now. Our attendance is averaging anywhere from maybe on the low side 40-ish, right in there. On the highest side we're at about 80. That would be more in the fall. Maybe we'll see some bump up in the spring. Our hope is to sometime within the next couple of years reach an average of about 100. We have an active roll of about 100, but we want to see our average attendance to hit that at some point as well. And we have lots of work to do to continue to reach that. So that's kind of what we're doing right now with Compass. And we want to share some principles though. So I just came back from spending 2 days with a team of people from around the country who are part of our denomination, who are in young adult ministry, to be more of a think tank to talk about how do we help our denomination, which is the Evangelical Covenant, do better at resourcing churches to engage young adults better. And so this think tank, we talked and explored different approaches, and we explored different principles and recommendations. And so out of that is where some of the principles that I'm talking about here today came from that. And then Albin and I met together and talked through it as well. But I want to set it up that these principles aren't intended to be a strategy or an approach, a model. We're hoping that they are just, no matter what you do, if you are integrating them into your Sunday services, if you're doing a separate service, if you're trying to do more of a campus ministry, whatever your approach is, these should be transferable across all of them. And so Albin's going to talk to us about the first one, which is about friendship, community.
Yeah, and like Jim was saying, these principles aren't necessarily set in stone. You need to know your context and your church and your culture. It's going to look totally different in our church and our culture, and it's going to be totally look different from the person next to you, unless you go to the same church. So, but these principles are going to be able to just give you a brief understanding of where young adults are at and maybe what they're looking for. So the first one we want to talk through is that friendship and community piece. And we want to necessarily talk about friendship because they are looking for somebody their own age. They're looking for somebody their own, what they like to do, whether it's sports or video games or whatever. They want friendship and community, and they want somewhere to belong too. And so what we want to do is that one of our principles is set up places where they can come and belong. Okay, so not just a young adult ministry per se, but on a Sunday morning, or a small group on a Monday night, or whatever it is, or a guy's Bible study on Wednesday mornings. Be thinking and having a principle across your church of saying, okay, we want to be welcoming, we want to be friendly, we want to have a place for them to land, and giving that opportunity both in a young adult context, but also across into more than just young adult context. So Sunday mornings would be another example. So.
Yeah, and building community goes beyond friendship. It's cross generations. It can be cross social classes. As long as it's a welcoming thing. And one of the things that can really keep young adults from feeling like they belong to community is no one talks to them. They're just seen and no one really engages them. Or the ones that do engage them respond in judgmental ways to some of the things that they do, or the way that they dress, or the way they talk, or what they're doing, or they feel like they just don't belong because they're different. So if you're going to minister to young adults, you've got to find a way to create a sense of belonging for them. finding friendships with their own peers is important. But if you don't have their own peers, then finding a way to welcome them and make them feel like they're a part of us in a meaningful way.
We really don't want young adults, and this is where both of our hearts are at, of slipping through the cracks.
Yeah.
And so if we have a good friendship in the community, hopefully they won't slip through the cracks.
Yeah. Second principle would be preaching or teaching that really connects with them. I think in my experience, young adults will come to church and they might be able to enjoy the worship experience, but if it's not a great worship experience, they'll stay through that for the preaching. If the preaching or the teaching is really connecting with them in a practical, pragmatic, helpful way, they'll stick with it. They'll stay. Because that's why they're there, is to grow in their faith. But it has to be pragmatic. Like everyday life, this is where it really helps me. And a lot of preachers tend to preach more toward the older adults, using bigger principles, maybe even a little more abstract. But young adults, at least in my experience, are still very concrete in their living, in their spiritual growth. They need concrete kinds of things.
Can you clarify what you mean a little bit when you say they're speaking to older people? Do you think that what they're teaching is not applicable?
Sometimes it's the
talking about
topics.
marriage or whatever.
Yeah,
not
right,
married?
right.
Or is it that their language
Language
they
too.
can't connect with?
It's
or
all of
is
it.
all of that?
All of it. It's the language you use, it's the concepts you're teaching, and then you might be teaching a really great thing. This is really deep and really powerful, like life-changing kind of message. But if you can't get it to the concrete, practical, pragmatic level of a young adult's life, they might not make that connection. And I mean, most adults have a hard time making that connection, let alone young adults who are still coming out of that teenage years. They're thinking abstractly, but they're still living very concretely. And so they need the different kind of language. They need different topics, even. They want to get into, well, there's a variety of topics to get into, but you've got to figure that out in your context. So I think we need to be teaching we were talking about this, the why and the how. So why does God teach this? Why does the Bible say this is wrong? Why does God want us to live this way? Or the how. So how do you pull that off? If we're not preaching and teaching in a very pragmatic, practical way, if we're not giving them strong biblical foundations, giving them good foundational theology, helping them with their identity, helping them form their identity, understand their vocation, their life and work, their sexuality, understanding what their purpose in life is, even understanding how other faiths are different from Christianity and the relationships there. I mean, just practical stuff. Getting into social issues even of race, gender, or systemic justice. For some, that's really important. Not all, but for some, they really want to explore that. And depending on your different regions where you live as well. So, preaching and teaching really does matter. And if it's not connecting with young adults, they're not going to come.
The next principle is basically the one following right after that, in the sense of young adults have a lot of questions. They're still figuring life out, both in, how to pay off debt and what does the Bible mean. And they still have a lot of questions. And so the next principle is an open dialogue between young adults and the preacher, the people inside the church, giving them space to ask questions, and then making sure you're diligent to answer the questions. Sometimes when they ask a question and they go, and you don't have the answer right away, make sure you go, you know what, I don't have the answer right away, but let me come back and give you some more answers after I research a little bit. But just having that open dialogue with young adults, allowing them to get their questions out. Well, why does this religion say this, and we say this? And that why piece can be addressed in preaching, but it can be really addressed in the conversation. One of the reasons I love young adult ministry is as we sit and we talk about these issues, whether it's social issues, whether it's theology issues, whatever it is, and they ask questions, and we start to dialogue into that, and they start to ask a little deeper questions, their gears start to churn. And their gears in their head start to go, oh, that's what it means. And oh, yeah, that's how that story is applicable to this and that. And so just having a sense of open dialogue. If they come with a question that you think is just a really, every Christian should know that question, don't put them off. Spend time and answer those questions. Talk through it with them because they wholeheartedly, they want to know answers. They're getting to that meat, like the Bible says. They're raised on milk and they're getting to the meat, and they're kind of figuring out how they're getting there. So having an open dialogue is kind of the next principle based up after preaching.
And that open dialogue, I think, is more about your church's culture than it is about a particular strategy. How do your people typically respond to people with different opinions?
Right.
If they respond with an opinionated response, that's going to shut young adults down. But if a conversation comes up and a young adult will say, they're talking in ways that this person in your congregation disagrees with, and they show judgmental face, they say a comment, oh, well, rather than valuing the person and wanting to listen to them and show more interest and ask them, tell me more about that. Like, that's where it's changing your culture, so that they feel like they actually care about me. They might disagree with me, but they value me more than being right. So a principle within this principle with open dialogue is you want to fight for the relationships, not to be right. And when young adults see that you value the relationship first, then we can later have some conversations about what's right, what's wrong in the context of healthy relationship. The next principle is fun. You gotta have fun. What are you doing that is fun in your church? That's just pure fun. Like, do you ever do anything with your congregation that's just, hey, let's just get together and go do something fun? Let's go bowling. Let's go ice skating. Let's go